The sun hung low over Willow Lake, casting long shadows across the water that lapped lazily at the overgrown banks. Elena Vargas stood at the edge of the public dock, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, the scent of algae and pine heavy in the humid air. She was no stranger to these shores. As the lead environmental consultant for the county, she'd spent years monitoring the lake's fragile ecosystem. But today, something felt off. The water level had dropped noticeably in the past week, enough to expose roots that should have stayed submerged and to make the old wooden pilings groan under the strain of exposure. Elena adjusted her notebook, scribbling notes on the unusual sediment patterns. It wasn't natural evaporation. The rainfall had been steady this summer. No, this was deliberate. Upstream, the new construction site for Blackthorn Developments loomed like a scar on the hillside, massive excavators humming faintly in the distance, their diesel fumes carried on the breeze. And Blackthorn wasn't just any developer. Whispers in town linked it to Victor Russo, the man who controlled half the city's shadows. Mafia, they called him in hushed tones at the local diner. A kingpin who built empires on concrete and secrets, his reach extending from the docks to the glittering penthouses downtown. She'd tried ignoring the rumors at first. But the lake was dying, and Elena had a duty to sound the alarm. With a deep breath, she pocketed her phone, after snapping a few discreet photos of the receding shoreline, and headed toward the chain-link fence marking the site's perimeter. The guards at the gate eyed her warily, their radios crackling with static. One of them, a burly man with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward. "Private property, ma'am. No trespassing." Elena held up her county badge, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I'm Elena Vargas, Environmental Services. I've got concerns about the water table. Mind if I speak to the site manager?" The guard hesitated, glancing at his partner before muttering into his radio. Minutes stretched like taffy under the relentless sun. Finally, he waved her through. "Boss wants to see you himself. Follow me." The site was a hive of controlled chaos. Workers in hard hats shouting over the whine of machinery, trucks rumbling in with loads of gravel that would soon choke the earth. They led her to a sleek black SUV parked near the temporary office trailer, its tinted windows reflecting the glare. As she approached, the door opened, and Victor Russo stepped out. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered in a tailored shirt that strained against his frame, his dark hair slicked back, eyes like polished obsidian. No flashy suit, but the gold watch on his wrist caught the light, a subtle flex of power. The air around him carried the faint tang of expensive cologne mixed with the site's dust. "Ms. Vargas," he said, his voice smooth, almost amused, extending a hand. "Heard you had questions about my lake." Elena shook it firmly, ignoring the warmth that lingered a beat too long. "It's not your lake, Mr. Russo. It's a public waterway, and your operations are accelerating drainage. The pumps you're running for the foundation work, they're pulling too much groundwater. If this continues, we'll see ecological collapse, fish kills, soil erosion, contamination seeping into the aquifer." Victor chuckled, a low rumble that didn't reach his eyes. He gestured to the water below, visible through a gap in the trees. "Ecological collapse? That's dramatic. We're building homes here, jobs for the community, progress." She pulled out her tablet, showing him the data. Graphs of water levels plummeting, satellite images highlighting the unnatural draw. "This isn't progress. It's short-sighted. I've warned the permits office, but they dragged their feet. If you don't adjust the pumps, the lake could dry up by fall. And that brings scrutiny. Federal, maybe. You don't want that." His smile faded slightly, replaced by a calculating gaze. He leaned against the SUV, crossing his arms. "You think you know my business, Ms. Vargas. This lake's been here 100 years. It'll be fine." Elena's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. There was something in his tone, a dismissal laced with warning. "I've seen sites like this before. One ignored variable and it all unravels. Call it professional courtesy. Shut down the secondary pumps for a week. Let the levels stabilize. Victor studied her, the hum of a distant generator filling the silence. Then he laughed outright, a genuine bark that echoed off the trailer. You're bold. Most people don't march onto my site waving graphs. Tell you what, come to dinner tonight. My place overlooking the lake. We'll discuss your concerns. It wasn't a request. Elena blinked, caught off guard. Dinner with a man whose name sent ripples of fear through boardrooms and back alleys? Curiosity warred with caution. Part of her wanted to walk away, file the report and let the bureaucracy grind. But another part, the one that had fought for this lake since her father taught her to fish its waters, saw an opportunity. If she could sway him directly, maybe avoid the endless red tape. Why dinner? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Because I like a good story, he replied, his gaze locking onto hers. And yours intrigues me. 8 o'clock. My driver will pick you up. As she nodded reluctantly, gratitude for the access mixing with a prickling unease, the guard handed her a card with an address. Blackthorn Manor, the old estate on the lake's north shore. Elena turned back toward her car, the gravel crunching underfoot, but she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her back. In the rearview mirror as she drove away, a dark sedan pulled out from the site's shadow, keeping a careful distance. That night, the air was cooler, the lake's surface a mirror under the rising moon. Elena dressed simply, a blouse and slacks, nothing to signal surrender. Yet her hands trembled as she waited on her porch. The black town car arrived precisely at 8, its engine purring like a contented beast. The driver, silent and stone-faced, nodded as she slid into the leather seat, the scent of polished hide enveloping her. The drive wound along the lakeside road, sodium lamps flickering on wet asphalt from an earlier drizzle. Elena's mind raced. What if this was a trap? Rousseau's world was one of rival crews vying for territory, shipments slipping through the docks under cover of night. Draining the lake. Could it be more than construction? Hiding something beneath the mud, perhaps? She dismissed the thought. Paranoia wouldn't help. The manor gate swung open without a word, revealing manicured lawns lit by floodlights. The house, a sprawling fortress of stone and glass. Security cameras whirred softly from the eaves, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. As the car pulled up, Victor waited on the steps, a glass of amber liquid in hand. Glad you came, he said, offering his arm. But as they entered the foyer, marble floors echoing their steps, Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an anonymous number. Leave now. He's not what he seems. She froze, glancing at Victor. His laugh from earlier echoed in her mind. What had she walked into? And why did the lake's whisper seem to follow her even here? The grand dining room of Blackthorn Manor overlooked the lake through floor-to-ceiling windows, the water's dark expanse reflecting the manor's golden lights like a fractured jewel. Candle flames danced on the polished oak table, casting flickering shadows that played across crystal glasses and silverware. The air held the rich aroma of seared steak and rosemary, undercut by the faint briny tang wafting from the shore below. Elena's heart hammered as she slipped her phone back into her pocket, the anonymous text burning in her mind. Leave now. He's not what he seems. She forced a neutral expression, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass, the cool Merlot doing little to steady her nerves. Victor settled into the chair across from her, his presence commanding the space without effort. He poured himself another measure from the decanter, the liquid glugging softly. You look tense, Ms. Vargas. Rough day at the office? Or is it the lake keeping you up at night? She met his gaze, searching for any tell, a twitch, a glance toward the shadows. But his face was a mask of easy confidence. Call me Elena. And yes, the lake. It's not just dropping levels. The sediments stirring up toxins from the old mill run off upstream. Your pumps are accelerating it. I've got samples back at the lab that could shut this site down if they test positive for heavy metals. He leaned back, swirling his glass, the ice clinking like distant chimes. Outside, the wind rustled the pines, carrying the low hum of a generator from somewhere on the grounds. Always the scientist. Admirable. But Blackthorn isn't some fly-by-night operation. We follow codes. My codes. No shortcuts that hurt the little guy. Those pumps? They're for foundations that won't crack in a flood. Safer homes. Elena arched an eyebrow, the word codes hanging in the air like smoke. In town, his codes meant something darker. Unspoken rules among the crews that ran the docks, enforcing loyalty with threats veiled as favors. She probed gently, her voice measured. Codes like what? Environmental regs? Or the kind that keep prying eyes away from shipping manifests? Victor's eyes narrowed fractionally, but his smile returned, sharp as a blade. Clever. You do your homework. Yes, manifests. Legit cargo, mostly. Steel beams, lumber for the builds. Nothing that'd dry up a lake on purpose. He gestured to the window, where the water lapped at the manor's private dock, pilings creaking faintly. This place has been in my family since my grandfather smuggled bootleg across that very shore. Legacy, Elena. We protect what's ours. The server, a quiet woman with a tight bun, cleared the appetizers, her movements efficient, eyes downcast. As she retreated through a side door, Elena caught a glimpse of a man in the hallway beyond, earpiece glinting under the chandelier light. Security, no doubt, their radios whispering static. She thought of the dark sedan tailing her earlier, and now this text. Who would warn her? A disgruntled worker? A rival sniffing for weakness? Pushing her plate aside, Elena leaned forward. If it's legacy, then listen to this. The water tables link to the old tunnels under the site. Abandoned rail lines from the 20s. Your excavators hit them yet? One breach, and your flooding subterranean channels could collapse the whole hillside. Victor paused, fork midway to his mouth, his amusement fading into something harder. The candlelight caught the faint scar along his jaw, a remnant of some long-ago street fight, she guessed. Tunnels? You're full of surprises. We've mapped the subsurface, ground-penetrating radar, the works. No breaches. But there was a hesitation, a flicker in his eyes that screamed inconsistency. He'd laughed off her warnings before, but now? Doubt. The storm outside picked up, rain pattering against the glass like impatient fingers. Thunder rumbled low, vibrating through the floorboards. Elena's phone vibrated again in her pocket. Another message? She resisted the urge to check, focusing instead on him. Humor me. Shut down the pumps overnight. Let me verify the levels tomorrow. If I'm wrong, you get the satisfaction of proving an environmentalist meddler wrong. He set his glass down with a deliberate clink, studying her as if weighing her worth. And if you're right, what then? You think I'd let a county badge dictate my builds? His tone dipped, possessive edge creeping in, like the lake was his to command, and by extension, anyone who dared challenge it. Yet beneath it, she sensed the pull of his code. A man who'd lost something to unchecked ambition, perhaps a family member to a rival's sabotage. Whispers said his father had drowned in an accident on these waters, pushing Victor to hoard control. Elena held his stare, autonomy clashing with the intrigue pulling her deeper. Gratitude for his ear warred with fear of the shadows closing in. I'm not dictating. I'm offering a way to avoid the fallout. Federal audits, lawsuits. Your legacy could sink faster than this lake. A beat of silence, broken only by the storm's howl. Victor nodded slowly, signaling the server for more wine. All right, pumps off till dawn, but you come back tomorrow, personally. See for yourself. It was a concession, laced with invitation, his gaze lingering on her like a claim staked. As dinner wound down, he walked her to the foyer, the manor's halls echoing with their footsteps. Marble chilled her skin through her shoes, and she caught the scent of wet earth from an open side door leading to the grounds. "Driver's waiting," he said, hand brushing her elbow. A touch too familiar, igniting a spark of unease and something dangerously like thrill. Outside, the rain sheeted down, blurring the lights. The town car idled at the steps, wipers slashing rhythmically. But as Elena stepped toward it, her phone buzzed once more. She pulled it out under the portico's shelter, screen glowing. Not the pumps. Check the docks. Midnight. Her breath caught. Whose game was this? And what waited in the shadows by the water? Salvation, or the unraveling of everything? The rain hammered the town car's roof like a relentless interrogation as it cut through the storm-slicked roads, the wiper's rhythmic swipe the only sound breaking Elena's spiraling thoughts. She clutched her phone, the screen's glow fading as she reread the latest message. Not the pumps. Check the docks. Midnight. Anonymous, urgent, and maddeningly vague. Who was this? A whistleblower from the site? Someone in Victor's orbit testing her loyalty? Or a rival baiting her into a trap? The manor's lights receded in the rear view, but the weight of his gaze lingered. That brush of his hand on her elbow a silent claim she couldn't shake. By the time the car pulled up to her modest cottage on the lake's eastern edge, the downpour had eased to a misty drizzle, the air thick with the scent of soaked pine and distant thunder. Elena thanked the driver curtly, her boots splashing through puddles as she dashed inside. The house was quiet, save for the tick of the old wall clock and the faint drip from a leaky faucet. She locked the door, leaning against it, heart still racing. Victor's concession on the pumps felt like a victory, but this text twisted it into doubt. If it wasn't the pumps, what was really pulling the lake dry? And why drag her into the shadows at midnight? She paced the living room, the worn hardwood creaking underfoot, her laptop open on the coffee table casting a blue pallor over stacks of environmental reports. Pulling up satellite feeds from the county database, she zoomed in on Blackthorn's docks, private slips tucked against the manor's north shore, where hulking barges sometimes unloaded under cover of night. The images showed unnatural sediment plumes trailing from the waterline, not just from construction runoff, but something mechanical, deliberate. A shadow in one frame caught her eye. A submerged pipe, perhaps, venting deeper than the pumps she'd accused. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. He'd been a dock worker, lost to a freak accident years ago, teaching her early that water hid more than fish. Legacy, Victor had said. Maybe his family's bootlegging past wasn't ancient history. Curiosity clawed at her caution. Ignoring the text felt like surrender. Heeding it could unravel everything. She glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m. Time enough to change into dark jeans and a hooded jacket, grab her flashlight and a small recorder from the field kit. No gun. She wasn't that deep in his world yet. But as she slipped out the back door, the lake's surface lapped restlessly against the shore, sodium lights from a distant bridge painting it in eerie yellow streaks. The path to the manor's docks wound through thickets of willow and marsh grass, the ground sucking at her boots with each step. Mosquitoes whined in the humid night, and the air carried a metallic tang, diesel, maybe, or something sharper. Halfway there, her phone vibrated again. Another text. Solo. No lights. Watch the patrols. She froze, scanning the tree line. A rustle, wind, or footsteps. Paranoia prickled her skin, but she pressed on, the manor's silhouette looming darker against the stormy sky. The docks came into view around a bend, weathered planks extending into the water, tied to a low-slung warehouse that squatted like a forgotten beast. No lights from the manor proper, but a faint hum emanated from the structure. Generators, she guessed, powering something hidden. She crouched behind a cluster of boulders, the chill seeping through her clothes, and waited. At midnight sharp, the warehouse door creaked open, spilling a sliver of yellow light. Two figures emerged, men in dark jackets, one carrying a clipboard, the other a handheld device that beeped softly. They moved to the water's edge, where a section of dock lifted hydraulically, revealing a submerged ramp. Elena's breath caught. Not construction gear. A sleek motorboat rose from the depths, water sluicing off its hull, engine idling low to mask the sound. The men boarded, the clipboard guy muttering into a radio. Manifest clear, extraction in 10, lake levels holding at 80%. Elena's mind raced. Extraction. This wasn't about building homes. It was logistics, smuggling, rerouting illicit cargo through underwater channels to evade port patrols. The tunnels she'd mentioned at dinner fed right into this, the draining a cover to deepen access for boats slipping under radar. Victor's code be damned. His legacy was built on these shadows, pulling the lake dry to keep his empire afloat. She fumbled for her phone to record, but a twig snapped behind her. Too close. She whipped around, flashlight beam cutting the dark. A silhouette detached from the trees, tall, unmistakable. Victor. Rain glistened on his coat, his face a storm of fury and something rawer. Betrayal? "Elena," he growled, voice low to avoid alerting the men. "What the hell are you doing here?" She stood, pulse thundering, the recorder still running in her pocket. "Me? You laughed off the warnings, but this—" She gestured to the boat, now motoring silently away, its wake rippling the exposed shallows. "Your progress is a front. Smuggling routes draining the lake to hide them. The toxics, the collapse, it's all collateral." His jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the warehouse as distant shouts echoed. Had they been spotted? He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with possessive urgency, pulling her deeper into the brush. "You think that's it? Rivals have been hitting my shipments, tapping the tunnels, forcing the draw to flush them out. It's war, Elena, not some eco-conspiracy." Thunder cracked overhead, lightning illuminating the scar on his jaw, a vulnerability cracking his mask. Loyalty warred in his stance. Protect her from the danger she'd stumbled into, or silence the threat to his code. But as they retreated, a new sound cut the night. Tires on gravel, headlights piercing the mist from the Manor's drive. The dark sedan from earlier, or worse. Elena's autonomy surged against his grip. "Let go. I came alone. But if this is your war, I'm not collateral." Yet fear twisted with the spark from dinner. Trust him or run. The radio crackle from his pocket spat static. "Boss, we've got a tail. Intruders on the dock." Who had sold them out? The anonymous texter? Or someone closer? And as the lights bore down, would Victor's code shield her, or drag them both under? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The headlights sliced through the mist like accusatory fingers, pinning Victor and Elena in the underbrush as the vehicle skidded to a halt on the gravel path leading to the docks. Rain lashed the leaves overhead, drumming a frantic rhythm that drowned out the lake's uneasy lap against the pilings. Victor's grip on her arm tightened. Not bruising, but unyielding. His body shielding hers instinctively as he drew a compact pistol from his coat with his free hand. The metal glinted dully in the storm's erratic flashes, a stark reminder of the world she'd crashed into. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts, the metallic tang of ozone mixing with the diesel reek from the warehouse generators humming defiantly in the distance. "Stay down," Victor hissed, his voice a gravelly command edged with urgency. He peered through the foliage, eyes narrowing at the car's silhouette. A black SUV, unmarked, its engine idling with predatory patience. No plates visible in the downpour, but the way it sat. Light's high beams cutting the night, screamed ambush. His radio crackled again. "Boss, 2 tangos on foot from the east fence, armed. Lake teams pulling back. Manifest secure, but we've got a leak." Elena's mind reeled, piecing the fragments. The anonymous texts pulling her here, the submerged boat vanishing into the tunnels. Victor's half-confession of rivals sabotaging shipments. It wasn't just smuggling. It was a siege. Factions clawing at his empire through the very veins of the lake. Old bootlegging routes repurposed for modern contraband. Drugs or arms funneled under the water table to bypass federal scanners at the main port. Her recorder, still tucked in her pocket, captured the radio's static-laced words. A digital breadcrumb that could topple him if she ever surfaced it. But autonomy surged against the fear knotting her gut. She wasn't his pawn, no matter the spark of reluctant trust flickering amid the chaos. She twisted in his hold, whispering fiercely, "Let me go. I can slip away, circle back to my car. You handle your war." Her voice carried the bite of independence, honed from years battling indifferent developers and bureaucratic stonewalls. Victor's father had died in these waters, she recalled from town whispers. A rival's planted explosive on a barge, disguised as a storm capsize. That loss forged his code. Protect the innocent, even if it meant iron-fisted control. Was she innocent now, or complicit? His jaw clenched, rain tracing the scar on his face like tears he wouldn't shed. "You think you can outrun this? That text that dragged you here, it's bait. Rivals knew you'd poke around after dinner. They want you as leverage, to force my hand on the roots." Possessiveness laced his tone, not just for the lake or his legacy, but for her, the bold woman who'd marched onto his site, challenging him where others cowered. He yanked her lower as doors slammed on the SUV, boots splashing through puddles, muffled voices barking coordinates in Italian-inflected English. The first shot cracked the night, a suppressed pop that splintered bark inches from Victor's shoulder. He fired back twice, the muzzle flash blooming orange, forcing the shadows to scatter toward the warehouse. "Move!" he growled, shoving Elena toward a narrow trail snaking along the water's edge. They bolted, mud sucking at their shoes, the storm's roar masking their flight. Thorny branches clawed at her jacket, drawing thin lines of fire across her skin, but adrenaline drowned the sting. Behind them, the pursuers fanned out. 3 men, by the shouts. One circling to cut them off at the manor's perimeter fence. Elena's lungs burned as they ducked into a thicket near the private boathouse, its weathered doors ajar, the scent of mildew and motor oil thick inside. Victor barricaded the entrance with a rusted oar, then dragged a tarp over them in the dim corner, the space cramped and reeking of damp canvas. His breath was hot against her ear, body pressed close in the confined dark. Quiet. They've got night vision, probably sourced from the same black market I cut off last month. His free hand hovered near her waist, not touching, but the tension hummed like a live wire. Loyalty clashed with suspicion. He'd saved her from the initial spotting, but was this protection or containment? She pulled out her phone, screen dimmed to a whisper, scrolling the texts. The anonymous number was a burner, untraceable without warrants she couldn't pull at midnight. "Who are they?" she murmured, pulse sinking with the distant splatter of footsteps outside. "The ones hitting your shipments. Same crew that killed your father?" Victor's silence stretched, broken only by the rain's tattoo on the tin roof. Then, a reluctant nod in the shadows. "Marcellos, old rivals, sniffing for weakness since I locked down the docks. The lake drain? My counter, flush their spies from the tunnels, deepen the channels for my runs. But it backfired, stirred up the toxics you flagged." Vulnerability cracked his voice, the code bending under confession. He'd laughed at her warnings to mask the desperation. But now, with her here, the pull toward trust warred with his instinct to shield her from the fallout. Autonomy be damned. A beam of light swept the boathouse windows, freezing them. Elena's heart slammed, one wrong breath, and... Victor's hand finally settled on her arm, steadying, possessive. "If we make the fence, my safe house is 2 miles east, armored convoy waiting on signal. But you bail now, they take you. Stay, and you're in." His eyes locked on hers in the faint glow, a pledge amid the peril. His world, with its betrayals and hard-won loyalties, or hers, unraveling alone. The light lingered, then swung away. False alarm? But a new crackle from his radio. "Boss, we've pinned one. He's talking, says the leak's internal. Your dinner guest isn't the only one watching." Elena's blood chilled. Internal. A turncoat in Victor's ranks, feeding the Marcellos her movements. But who, and how deep did the betrayal run? As shouts echoed closer, the boathouse door rattled under a heavy kick, splintering the night. Would his code hold, or would the lake claim another legacy in the storm? The boathouse door shuddered under another brutal kick, wood groaning like a wounded animal as splinters flew into the dim interior. Rain cascaded off the tin roof in sheets, amplifying the thunderous impacts until Elena's ears rang with the chaos. Victor's body tensed against hers under the tarp, his pistol raised, the barrel a cold shadow in the cramped space. The air was thick with mildew and the acrid bite of gun oil, every breath a labored whisper amid the storm's fury. Elena's pulse thundered in her temples, her back pressed to the rough plank wall, the chills seeping through her soaked jacket like icy fingers. "Out in 10, or we smoke you," a voice snarled from outside, thick with a Brooklyn edge. Marcellos' crew, no doubt. Their accents a giveaway from the old waterfront grudges. Footsteps sloshed in puddles, circling the structure, the beam of a tactical flashlight stabbing through cracked windows like accusatory lances. Victor's radio spat another burst of static. "Boss, hold position. Backup's 3 minutes out. Convoy from the east gate. But the leak. It's Marco, the site foreman. Talking to them about the dinner. Your concession on the pumps." Victor's curse was a low hiss, betrayal etching deeper lines into his rain-streaked face. Marco, the scar-jawed guard who'd waved her through the site that first day, his radio crackling with feigned routine. Internal rot, festering under the code Victor swore by. Loyalty or death. Elena's mind raced, piecing the puzzle. The anonymous texts weren't random. Marco had fed her just enough to draw her into the crossfire, turning her curiosity into a weapon against Victor's empire. The lake's drain wasn't just logistics, it was a battlefield, tunnels siphoning not only water but secrets, rivals using the environmental fallout to mask their sabotage. "We can't wait," Elena murmured, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. Autonomy burned hot. She'd dragged herself here on principle, not to huddle in his shadow. The side window. I can slip out, draw them off. You cover the door. It was Prudence clashing with his possessiveness, her ethics demanding she fight on her terms, not as collateral in his war. Victor's eyes flashed in the faint glow from his phone screen, where he'd silenced the radio to avoid detection. "No, you're not bait." His tone brooked no argument, laced with that raw edge of protection born from loss. His father's drowning a ghost haunting every ripple on the lake. But beneath the command, vulnerability flickered. He'd pulled her deeper into this, his laughter at her warnings now a bitter echo. The code restrained him. No innocence harmed. But she wasn't innocent anymore. Not after witnessing the submerged ramps, the manifests whispering of arms shipments rerouted through the drying channels to undercut federal port surveillance. The door buckled inward with a final crash, flooding the boathouse with rain and the silhouettes of 2 intruders, their silhouettes hulking against the storm. Victor fired first, a precise double tap that dropped the lead man with a muffled thud, his flashlight clattering across the oil-slicked floor. The second dove behind a stack of rusted buoys, returning fire blindly, bullets whining off metal supports and embedding in the walls with sharp cracks. Elena flinched, the tarp slipping as she scrambled for the side window, its frame warped from years of humidity. Glass shattered under her elbow, shards biting her palm. But she ignored the sting, hauling herself through into the muddy shallows outside. The lake water lapped at her waist, shockingly cold, carrying the foul undercurrent of stirred sediments, toxic she'd warned about, now weaponized by the drain. Victor was right behind her, shoving through the gap as shouts erupted from the warehouse side. "Go, fence line, now!" He grabbed her hand, pulling her along the dock's edge, their boots slipping on algae-slick planks. Distant headlights pierced the mist from the manor's drive. Victor's convoy, tires churning gravel. But closer, the third pursuer emerged from the trees, a burner phone in one hand, pistol in the other, barking into the device. "Got 'em pinned! Send the extract. Tunnel's clear for the dive." Elena yanked free, surging ahead, her independence afire against his grip. The tunnels, they're using them now, flooding back to cover tracks. It was the clue she'd chased. Not just draining, but a counterflood. Rivals reversing the flow with hidden pumps to submerge evidence of their infiltration. Human error, institutional blind spots. The county's outdated maps hadn't flagged the old rail vents, letting the Marcellos burrow like termites. Victor overtook her, his longer strides eating the distance to the perimeter fence. A chain-link barrier topped with razor wire that hummed faintly under the storm's static. He vaulted it first, landing with a grunt in the overgrown ditch beyond, then boosted her over, his hands firm on her waist. A touch that lingered, possessive yet protective, igniting that unwelcome spark amid the peril. They sprinted through the thicket, branches whipping their faces, the convoy's roar growing louder as it barreled down the access road. Gunfire stitched the night behind them, bullets thudding into tree trunks. But the fence bought time. Credible logistics, Victor's men rotating patrols every 15 minutes, a tell she'd overlooked in her initial site visit. The lead SUV skidded to a halt at the ditch's edge, doors flying open as armed figures spilled out, their radios a chorus of clipped orders. Victor shoved Elena into the back seat, sliding in beside her, the leather creaking under their weight. The door slammed, engine revving as they peeled away, tires spraying mud. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of wet wool and adrenaline, a partition separating them from the driver. Victor holstered his pistol, wiping blood from a shallow graze on his forearm. Nothing fatal, but a cost of the night's unraveling. "You're in it now," he said, voice rough, eyes locking on hers in the dashboard's glow. "Marco's leak means they know about you, your reports, the samples, but my code holds. No one touches what's under my protection." It was a pledge, laced with the push-pull of his world, loyalty demanding surrender, yet his restraint a vow shaped by past sacrifices. Elena met his gaze, fear yielding to a tentative trust, her ethics bending but unbroken. The lake's legacy wasn't his alone. She'd fight for it, on her terms. But as the convoy merged onto the lakeside road, Victor's phone buzzed, a secure line, his face paling at the message. The safe house coordinates, compromised. The internal betrayal ran deeper than Marco. Someone in the convoy itself, a subtle behavioral tell in the driver's rearview glance. Who had sold the route, and as the taillights of pursuing vehicles flickered in the mirrors? Would the lake's secrets drown them both before dawn? The convoy tore along the lakeside road, tires hydroplaning on the rain-slicked asphalt, the wipers slashing furiously against the relentless downpour. Inside the lead SUV, the air was thick with tension, the faint hum of the engine underscoring the labored breaths of Elena and Victor. She pressed against the door, her soaked clothes clinging like a second skin, the metallic scent of blood from his grazed arm mingling with the leather's polished hide. Victor's phone screen cast a harsh blue glow on his face, his thumb scrolling through encrypted messages with grim efficiency. The partition to the driver remained opaque, but Elena caught that tell. A fleeting glance in the rear view, too calculated, too loaded with unspoken intent. "Compromised," Victor muttered, his voice a low rumble that cut through the storm's howl outside. He pocketed the phone, eyes flicking to the side mirror where taillights pierced the mist. Two sedans closing fast, their high beams flickering like signals in the night. "Safe house is burned. They knew the route before we left the manor." His free hand clenched into a fist on his thigh, knuckles whitening. The code he'd built his empire on, loyalty forged in blood, cracked under the weight of this betrayal. Marco was just the surface. Someone deeper had sold them out, feeding the Marcellos real-time intel on his movements, his concessions, even her involvement. Elena's mind whirred, piecing clues like fragments of a shattered manifest. The anonymous texts, timed too perfectly to her dinner with Victor. Marco's radio chatter that first day at the site, now revealed as a relay. But the driver's glance? That was fresh. A behavioral slip. Eyes darting not to the road but to assess his cargo. "It's him," she whispered, nodding toward the partition. "The way he checked us back there. Not a guard's routine. Too personal." Her voice carried the edge of her independence, a refusal to be mere witness in his war. She'd waded into the lake's underbelly for the ecosystem, not to become a pawn in factional chess. Yet the pull toward him tugged harder, gratitude for his shield mingling with suspicion. Victor shot her a sidelong look, possessiveness flaring in his dark eyes despite the peril. "You spot tells like that? Sharp!" He rapped the partition twice, code for alert. But the driver's response was a curt acknowledgement, the SUV accelerating without veering toward evasion. No radio call to the trailing vehicles, no evasive weave. Victor's jaw tightened, the scar along it pulling taut as lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the receding lake to their left, its surface unnaturally low, exposed mudflats gleaming like bared teeth. If it's Gino, the driver, then the Marcellos have eyes in my inner circle. Been with me 5 years. Thought the code held him. The road curved sharply around a bend, sodium lamps blurring into streaks, their yellow haze reflecting off puddles that mirrored the chaos above. Elena's pulse synced with the engine's growl, her hand instinctively gripping the door handle. "Your code? The one that protects innocence while you drain the lake for smuggling lanes?" The words slipped out sharper than intended, ethics clashing against the raw vulnerability in his confession earlier. The father's death, the tunnels as both lifeline and grave. Fear of the closing sedans warred with her autonomy, run when they stopped, or lean into this uneasy alliance. Victor's laugh was bitter, short-lived. That code kept the toxics from spreading unchecked, until the Marcellos reversed the pumps, flooding their sabotage back into the channels. My laugh at your warnings? Mask for the mess I couldn't fix without tipping my hand. He leaned forward, pressing a concealed button on the dash, a silent alarm to the trailing SUVs in the convoy. But the response was sluggish. One of the escort vehicles swerved erratically, its brakes locking in a skid that screamed tampered hydraulics. Human error? No. Sabotage, brakes lined with inferior parts sourced from a compromised supplier. A subtle ledger entry she'd glimpsed in her satellite scans of the site manifests. The pursuing sedans surged, one pulling alongside the convoy's rear guard with aggressive precision. Gunfire erupted, muffled pops from suppressed barrels, shattering the escort's side mirror in a spray of glass. Victor ducked, yanking Elena low across the seat, his arm a protective barrier over her. Hold on. The driver, Gino, jerked the wheel, but too late. The lead pursuer rammed the SUV's flank, metal screeching in a jolt that sent them fishtailing toward the guardrail. Tires smoked, the vehicle slewing across lanes, the lake's edge looming perilously close, its drained shallows a muddy trap below. Elena twisted free, slamming the partition's emergency release. It dropped with a thud, revealing Gino's profile, sweat beading on his brow, eyes wide but not with fear, with calculation. Traitor, Victor snarled, pistol whipping out faster than she could track, pressing it to the man's temple. The SUV lurched as Gino swerved instinctively, the barrel of a hidden shotgun emerging from under the dash. A struggle ensued, Victor's free hand wrenching the wheel, Elena lunging to stomp the brake pedal, her boot connecting with a grind of machinery. The vehicle shuddered to a halt inches from the rail, gravel spraying as the pursuers overshot, skidding into a spin. Victor subdued Gino with a precise strike, zip-tying his wrists before shoving him into the footwell. The convoy's remaining escort circled back, radios crackling with confirmations. Leak secured. Marcellos retreating. Tunnels flooded. Their dive aborted. But victory bittered. The safe house lost. Gino's betrayal a deeper wound, exposing how rivals had infiltrated supply chains, guard rotations compromised by bribes masked as overtime ledgers. As they transferred to a backup vehicle, armored, untraceable, Victor turned to Elena, rain dripping from his hair, his gaze a storm of resolve and reluctant need. You saved us back there, but this war's on your doorstep now. Stay with me. My code extends to you. Possessiveness wrapped the offer, loyalty demanding her surrender, yet his eyes held the cost, exposure, the lake's secrets spilling into her world. Elena hesitated, the chill wind carrying the lake's briny whisper, her palm still stinging from the boathouse glass. Trust him fully, or extract herself before the flood? But as the new SUV accelerated into the night, Victor's secure line buzzed again. A voice from the manor. Boss, the warehouse alarm's tripped. Someone's inside, checking the ledgers. Internal rot lingered. Who else had turned? And what hidden manifest would surface to drag them under before the dawn broke? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The backup SUV barreled through the pre-dawn gloom, its tires humming over rain-slicked blacktop as the lake's silhouette faded into the tree line. Inside, the cabin was a cocoon of muted luxury. Heated seats thawing Elena's chilled limbs, the faint scent of fresh coffee from a thermos mingling with the lingering ozone of the storm. Victor sat rigid beside her, his bandaged forearm a stark white against his dark shirt, eyes fixed on the encrypted tablet in his lap. The partition was up again, this time with a trusted driver from the outer detail. No tells, no glances that screamed duplicity. But trust felt like fragile ice now, cracking under the weight of revelations. Elena's hand throbbed from the boathouse glass, a dull pulse she wrapped in a makeshift bandage from the glove compartment kit. She stared out the window, the sodium lamps blurring into golden halos, her mind sifting the night's debris. Gino's betrayal, the reversed pumps flooding the tunnels to thwart the Marcellos' dive, the warehouse alarm signaling fresh intrusion. Ledgers, she'd overheard on Victor's radio, discreet notebooks, not digital trails, tracking shipments with coded entries, steel for arms, lumber for contraband crates. If rivals cracked them, his entire operation unraveled, exposing not just logistics but the human cost. The bribed officials, the coerced workers like her father had been. You all right? Victor's voice broke the silence, low and edged with concern that bordered on possession. He set the tablet aside, his gaze tracing her profile as if mapping her resolve. The code that restrained his power, no innocence dragged under, warred with the instinct to pull her closer, to claim her as part of his guarded world. Legacy shaped him. His father's death in those same waters, a rival's bomb disguised as mechanical failure, teaching him that vulnerability invited the flood. She met his eyes, autonomy flaring against the pull. Physically, scraped up. But this... She gestured vaguely at the passing pines, their branches dripping like weeping sentinels. Your war's bleeding into mine. The lake's toxics aren't collateral anymore. They're evidence. If those ledgers show how the drain hid your roots, the feds won't care about Mafia codes. They'll seize the site, the manor, everything. Ethics burned in her chest, gratitude for his protection clashing with the moral duty to expose the rot, even if it meant sacrificing the fragile bond sparking between them. Victor's jaw tightened, the scar along it catching the dashboard glow. You think I don't know the cost? The pumps were my play. Deepen the channels to starve their access, flush spies without full exposure. But Gino, he rerouted manifests to them, sold guard rotations for a cut. He leaned back, the leather creaking, vulnerability etching his features. Outside, the road narrowed into a service lane paralleling forgotten rail tracks, remnants of the 20s tunnels snaking beneath the lake, their vents now choked with mud from the engineered draw. A distant rumble echoed. Not thunder, but generators kicking in at a hidden outpost, powering surveillance cams that swept the underbrush. The SUV slowed at a chain-link gate, its keypad beeping as the driver punched in a code. They rolled into a nondescript warehouse on the industrial fringe, far from the lake's whisper. A safe house disguised as a storage depot for Blackthorn's legit hauling ops. Floodlights snapped on, illuminating stacks of crates and the hum of security drones whirring overhead, their infrared lenses scanning for heat signatures. Victor guided Elena inside, his hand hovering at her back. Not touching, but close enough to ignite that tension, loyalty demanding he shield her while suspicion lingered in her stance. The interior was Spartan, concrete floors echoing their steps, the air heavy with the tang of oil and stale coffee. A bank of monitors flickered to life on a makeshift command table, feeds from the manor and docks patching in grainy but clear. One screen showed the warehouse by the lake, doors ajar, shadows moving inside. "There," Victor said, pointing to a figure in a hooded jacket rifling through a lockbox near the submerged ramp. The intruder paused, pulling out a slim ledger, flashlight beam dancing over pages dense with shorthand, dates, weights, drop points. "That's no Marcello grunt. Look at the gate, too deliberate." Elena's breath caught as she leaned in, the screen's glow casting her face in blue pallor. The figure's posture clicked, a subtle hunch, familiar from site visits. "The server from dinner," she murmured. The woman who cleared plates. Quiet, eyes down, but she lingered by the side door, near the hall cams. Inconsistencies flooded back, the faint click of a burner phone in her apron pocket, the way she'd avoided the rain-slicked grounds despite the storm. Not a rival plant, but an inside turncoat, closer than Gino. Perhaps bought with promises of autonomy from Victor's iron rule, or coerced by family debts the Marcellos exploited. Victor's fist slammed the table, monitors jittering. "Lena, she's been with the manor staff for years, vetted, or so I thought." Possessiveness surged, his code fracturing. He'd built walls to protect his circle, but betrayal seeped through like groundwater. Rain pattered against the warehouse roof, a steady drum underscoring the feed's audio, muffled voices from the lake site, the intruder's radio crackling. "Got the primary ledger, tunnels flooded as planned, boss's roots exposed, extraction via east vent in 5. Elena's pulse quickened, piecing the investigative thread. The anonymous texts traced back to Lena's access, using Elena's warnings to sow chaos, forcing Victor's concessions and drawing her into the open. She's signaling them now. If they get that ledger out, it's over. Shipping manifests linking your steel to black market arms. The lake drain is cover for reroutes. Prudence warred with the thrill of the hunt. She could walk, file her county report clean of this mess. But the lake's legacy pulled her deeper. Her father's unseen death perhaps tied to these same shadows. "We move," Victor said, grabbing a secure radio and signaling 2 men from the shadows, loyal guards, their earpieces glinting. "Convoy to the lake site. You stay here. Cameras, coordinates." But his eyes pleaded, the push-pull evident. Command her safety, yet crave her insight. Her independence a mirror to his restrained power. "No," Elena shot back, grabbing a spare jacket from a hook, its weight grounding her. "I spotted her. And if it's family pulling her strings, like your loss pulled you, then ending this blind drags us all under." Trust flickered between them, fragile as the receding waterline, loyalty forged in shared peril. As the convoy engines roared to life outside, tires crunching gravel, Victor nodded, a reluctant smile ghosting his lips. But the lead monitor glitched, a camera angle shifting unnaturally, revealing a second figure in the warehouse shadows. Not Lena. Taller, armed, watching her back. Deeper rot, or a trap within the trap. And as they piled into the vehicles, The lake's distant hum seemed to warn. Who held the final ledger? And would dawn reveal salvation or total submersion? The convoy's engines growled through the industrial sprawl, headlights carving tunnels of light through the lingering mist, as dawn's first gray fingers clawed at the horizon. Elena gripped the door handle in the lead SUV, the vibration humming up her arm, syncing with the adrenaline still thrumming in her veins. Victor sat beside her, radio pressed to his ear, his voice clipped as he coordinated the approach. Flank the east vent, drones up for thermal, no shots unless confirmed hostile. The warehouse by the lake loomed ahead, its silhouette a hulking shadow against the receding waterline, exposed mudflats glistening like a wound under the sodium floodlights. Rain had tapered to a drizzle, the air heavy with the briny reek of stirred sediments and the faint, oily tang of diesel from idling generators. Elena's bandaged hand ached, a reminder of the boathouse scramble, but her focus sharpened on the monitors patched into the dash, grainy feeds from the site's perimeter cams. Lena's figure darted across one screen, ledger clutched under her arm, slipping toward the submerged ramp where the tunnels yawned like forgotten veins. But the second shadow, the taller one, hovered at the warehouse's rear, movements too precise, too watchful. Not a guard. The posture screamed operative, earpiece catching the light as he scanned for tails. "That's no inside job," Elena murmured, leaning closer to Victor. "Hired muscle. The Marcellos don't send grunts for ledgers. They embed them." Victor's eyes flicked to her, a mix of pride and frustration in the tight line of his mouth. "You see too much." Possessiveness edged his tone, the code that bound him. No loose ends, no innocence exposed, clashing with her unyielding autonomy. He'd pulled her into this convoy against his better judgment, her insight, a weapon he couldn't holster. Yet the fear of losing her gnawed deeper than any betrayal. The lake's drain had been his gambit, a calculated pull to choke rival access, but it unearthed more than mud. Old grudges, like the one that claimed his father, resurfacing in Lena's defection. She'd been coerced, he suspected. Family in the Marcellos' grip, a debt ledger Victor's own ops had indirectly fueled. The SUVs fanned out at the site's perimeter, tires crunching over gravel as guards deployed with practiced silence, their suppressed rifles sweeping the shadows. Victor killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the lake's uneasy lap against the pilings. Levels stabilized overnight, his concession to her warnings holding the line. But at what cost? Elena followed him out, the chill mist beating on her skin, her boots sinking into the damp earth. Distant, the warehouse door creaked open under a security override, the hum of a jammed alarm silent, disabled by insider access. A guard rotation skipped via Gino's leaked schedules. They advanced in tandem, Victor signaling a wedge formation. Elena tucked behind a loyal man named Rico, his bulk a shield. The air carried the low buzz of drones overhead, their rotors whispering reconnaissance. Partial discovery hit like a gut punch. The second figure emerged from the warehouse flank, not fleeing but converging on Lena at the ramp. A muffled exchange, too low for audio pickup, then a nod. Betrayal layered. Lena wasn't the pawn. She was the pivot, handing the ledger to the operative before vanishing into the tree line, her path cleared by a staged diversion. A flare popped skyward, drawing fire to the east fence. "Ambush!" Victor barked into his radio, as the operative bolted for the water, ledger waterproofed in a sealed pouch. Gunfire stitched the night from concealed positions, Marcello snipers. Perched on the hillside overlooks, their angles plotted from satellite data Elena's county reports had unwittingly flagged. Bullets whined off crates, one grazing Rico's shoulder in a spray of red, his grunt swallowed by the chaos. Victor shoved Elena behind a stack of gravel bags, his body covering hers as he returned fire, the pistol's recoil a steady thump. "Stay low. Convoy extract in 2. But autonomy surged. She couldn't cower. Spotting the operative's path, slipping toward a hidden skiff moored in the shallows, engine prepped for a tunnel dive, Elena broke cover, sprinting parallel along the exposed bank. Mud sucked at her boots, the cold water sloshing her ankles, carrying the toxic bite she'd sampled weeks ago. "The ledger. It's got the manifests," she shouted over the din, her voice raw. Victor cursed, flanking her, his shots pinning the operative as the skiff's motor coughed to life. The race tightened. Drones swooped low, thermal blooms marking the sniper nests, Victor's men advancing under covering fire. The operative reached the skiff, but Elena lunged, tackling him into the shallows, a desperate grapple, water churning around them. The pouch tore free, ledger pages scattering like dark confetti, ink bleeding but legible. Coded entries exposing rerouted arms, shipments, bribes to port officials, the lake drain's dual purpose, logistics and sabotage. The operative twisted, a knife flashing, slicing her jacket but missing flesh. Victor hauled him off, a brutal takedown ending in zip ties, the man's burner phone splashing into the muck. Silence fell as the convoy sirens wailed in, Marcellos retreating into the mist, defeated but not destroyed. Guards secured the site, Rico's wound triaged in the back of an SUV, a cost etched in blood and exposure. Victor knelt by Elena, helping her up, his hands steadying her shoulders, the possessiveness yielding to something softer, gratitude perhaps, for her refusal to yield. "You got it." The threat was deeper than pumps or rivals. Organized rot, from my circle to theirs. His voice cracked, the code intact but scarred. No innocence harmed. Yet here she was, marked by his world. As dawn broke, painting the lake in pale gold, they stood on the dock, the water's surface rising slightly from the halted draw. A fragile recovery. The ledger's remnants burned in a secure incinerator. Evidence destroyed, but the revelation lingered. Victory demanded sacrifice. Rico's injury, Lena's exposure leading to her family's extraction under Victor's protection. The manor's security overhaul costing alliances. Yet the true treasure emerged in the quiet. Trust forged in the flood, his restraint a pledge against her independence. "This lake's ours to save," he said, eyes locking on hers. A future sketched in shared vigilance, commitment without chains, a found family rising from the depths. Weeks later, the site hummed with adjusted pumps and remediation crews, the water levels stabilizing under joint oversight. Elena's ethics guiding Victor's legacy. The adventure's scars faded, but the memories bound them. Loyalty outlasting power. The lake's whisper a testament to choices made in storm and shadow. No empires toppled, but a deeper code endured, one of mutual guard, where autonomy and protection intertwined. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.